This is Dr. Deepak Chopra, and in this video, I'm going to outline my history and my relationship with both militant atheists and skeptics, and update you on where it is at the moment. So, my history starts with Michael Schermer, who basically started calling me a pseudoscientist after the publication of my book, Quantum Healing. And then, of course, he also engaged with me later by putting me on the cover of Skeptic Magazine as the ultimate expression of both pseudoscience and what he referred to then as me being a charlatan. In other words, that I was a fraud. I did not respond to Michael in those days because actually I was unaware of all the things that were being written about me in Skeptic Magazine, and I had no relationship with Michael Schermer. I have to say, actually, the relationship has improved tremendously over the years. The real thing that started my engagement with militant atheists, and by the way, the word militant atheist was not created by me, but by Richard Dawkins, where he actually tells everybody in a lecture he gave at TED that he wants them to be militant atheists. So that's a term that Richard coined. But my real engagement started in the year 2000 when I was invited to give a TED talk. And I happened to arrive at the venue of the TED talk. This is not TEDx, it's the original TED. And it used to happen in Monterey, California. And so when I showed up to do the talk, Dawkins was actually speaking. And he's got a very kind of powerful presence on stage. And he had not yet, I think, written the book The God Delusion, but he obviously was writing it, or it must be ready for publication because that's what the book was about. He enjoined the audience to be militant atheists. He basically spoke about why anybody who wasn't an atheist was unintelligent and so on. My talk followed Dawkins' talk, and during his talk, listening to his talk, I was quite amazed by the fact that he looked very arrogant. He felt to me like he was condescending to the audience. The audience was very impressed by him, though, as sometimes I feel American audiences are, by a British accent, and particularly, he was a professor from Oxford, and he's supposed to be a great scientist. He had written a great book, The Selfish Gene, which I was a fan of at that time. So my talk was going to be on creativity, but I actually changed the subject and I responded to his talk. And I'm afraid I started my talk by calling him a bigot. I also referred to him as a scientific fundamentalist. I do regret that to some extent now, in hindsight. This is 2002. And I gave my talk, which was basically about the primacy of consciousness as fundamental reality. I got a standing ovation for that talk. I was congratulated by Ted Turner and other people. And I left. But shortly after that, my talk disappeared from the TED website. It couldn't be found. I didn't worry about that, but rumor had it that I was now considered a pseudoscientist by people at TED, and the scientific advisors of TED had said that, you be careful of this Deepak Chopra because he's a pseudoscientist and he should never be on TED. Anyway, that was that. Till a couple of years later, a few years later, I was in Oxford and I got a call from Channel 4 that they wanted to interview me. I was in Oxford giving talks on ecology and integrative medicine and other things. So I said, of course, to Channel 4, and they came up and set up a provisional studio in my hotel in one of the rooms there, or out in the garden. I think it was out in the garden. And I arrived for my interview, and they wouldn't start. So I said, why don't we start? And they said, we are waiting for our interviewer. Shortly thereafter, Richard Dawkins appeared as the interviewer. So it was clearly an ambush. I wasn't told the truth, but I didn't mind. And Richard interviewed me at length. My recollection is that the interview lasted well over an hour. And I felt pretty good about it, although I have to say in the beginning I was a little intimidated and even nervous and maybe a little out of breath because this was a surprise and he was clearly a little aggressive and hostile towards me. But overall, I was happy with the interview. That interview was edited to a few minutes segment and appeared in a movie that Richard did called Enemies of Reason, where I was clearly exposed, quote unquote, as a charlatan. And, parts of that are on YouTube. You can watch it. And it's had hundreds of thousands of views where people have congratulated Richard for exposing a charlatan. So that was that. And then what happened is that I was told by Michael Schermer that he was interested in having a debate with me. And so we had this debate. It's a few years ago, not that long. It was called The Future of God. It took place at Caltech. And Gene Houston and I were on the side of those people who claim that there is some kind of consciousness in the universe that is fundamental. And Michael Schermer and Sam Harris were on the other side. And Michael wasn't very convincing to me. Sam Harris is a very intelligent debater. He's very sharp intellectually. And he made some points that got a lot of applause from the audience. I, on one or two occasions, raised my voice, which wasn't really very elegant of me. But the bottom line is, I think Sam felt that he had made great points, exposed my what he called pseudoscience, mixing quantum physics with spirituality. Now, of course, there are at least 10 interpretations of quantum physics. And it's not that quantum mechanics is in any way controversial. Quantum mechanics is pure mathematics. It's basically the Schrodinger's equation and other people who contributed to revising Schrodinger's equation to some extent. But it's the interpretations of quantum mechanics that are indeed controversial. The most popular interpretation of quantum mechanics still is the Copenhagen interpretation, which brings in the role of an observer. And the observer can only, of course, be consciousness. So consciousness influences the collapse of the wave function. And at that time, I was most familiar with the Copenhagen interpretation. Of course, I do know that there are many other interpretations, transactional interpretation, multiple worlds theories, and so on and so forth, which do not require the role of an observer in collapsing the wave function. So we kind of got caught up in that, and I was told that my my interpretation of quantum physics was hocus pocus, pseudoscience, etc. In that debate was an atheist physicist who was then writing a book in collaboration with Stephen Hawking called The Grand Design. And in that debate, Leonard Malodnow, the physicist from Caltech, took me to task for misinterpreting quantum mechanics, offered to teach me quantum mechanics. And so that made lots of news. And the debate was hosted and still is line. It was hosted by ABC News Nightline, and that piece where Leonard called me out is one that has received a lot of attention. But I've always thought that challenges are opportunities. So I told Leonard I could teach him about consciousness and spirituality if he could teach me about quantum mechanics. And so we made lemonade out of the lemon and ended up with a book that Leonard and I wrote called War of the World Views, where he represented the materialistic, scientific, atheist perspective, and I took the consciousness as fundamental perspective, which is spirituality. So the book was a New York Times bestseller. We traveled across the country. Leonard and I never agreed on anything, but we became friends. I taught him how to meditate, which he enjoyed, and he also then came to Sages and Scientists, which is a conference. He also then came to Sages and Scientists, which is a conference hosted by the Chopra Foundation. We invited Michael Schermer as well, and Michael and I became quite friendly to each other, although we continued to disagree. Now, Michael has, of course, gone on record and is quoted in Wikipedia even now that he thinks I'm the ultimate example of pseudoscience. But I think when Michael came to our Sages and Scientists conference, he saw that I was collaborating with many physicists. We had Hans-Peter Duer, who was the former executive director of the Max Planck Institute, student of Werner Heisenberg. We had Henry Stapp. We had, of course, Leonard. We had at one of our conferences, Joel Primack, the astrophysicist who described dark matter in the universe, Bernard Heish, an astrophysicist who believes in the fundamental nature of consciousness. So I think Michael Schermer did see the other perspective, but of course he didn't step off his stance that matter is fundamental, and anybody who talks of spirituality is basically hocus pocus and a pseudoscientist. Thereafter, what happened is I was on a show on Fox, and I was on this show where I made some nasty comments about Dawkins, and he was very upset with me, apparently, from other people. And when I wrote the book, War of the World Views, Dawkins actually called Malodnow. I sent him an email saying that he was collaborating with a charlatan. In fact, I think Leonard also received some kind of communication from Stephen Hawking's daughter warning him that he was collaborating with a charlatan. I think this was all instigated, to my knowledge, by Dawkins. I kept challenging Dawkins to debate with me, and his usual excuse was that he would give me credibility if he debated with me, and he did not want to give credibility to a charlatan. In any case, I also apologized to Dawkins for having made those remarks about him, and I still stand by that because those remarks were a bit mean-spirited. Then last year we ended up having a debate in Mexico that was organized in a small city in Mexico, and it was promoted as the debate of the century. Dawkins showed up, I showed up. Actually, I was offered a very substantial amount of money for that debate, $80,000. I wanted to debate Dawkins anyway, and Dawkins showed up, and we had a pretty good debate. In my mind, Dawkins made some good remarks, but overall, he was again arrogant. He was angry. He appeared flustered. He used a lot of ad hominem, and he was just really dismissive of anything I said. So the debate was over, and afterwards, when I think Dawkins was questioned why he debated me, he said he did it to basically do a favor to his friend, which surprised me that because I did it because I wanted to, and also I was paid a substantial amount of money fee, $80,000, pretty substantial amount of money to be paid for a debate, and he did it just to oblige a friend. I'm sure he got paid though, but I don't know for a fact. If he did it only for a friend, then that's very magnanimous of him. The debate is available for anyone to see on YouTube, and it's called Dangerous Ideas, so you can check it out, and so on. Since then, I've now engaged with Jerry Coyne through email. I've engaged with Daniel Dennett. I've engaged not with Sam Harris. It's been kind of one-sided. I've been trying to get him to talk at Scientists and Sages. He asked for a $60,000 fee. Normally we give $4,000 to our speakers. I was actually okay with the $60,000 if he came and engaged with people, but he didn't want to. He would come in and out, and I couldn't afford that. So there hasn't been much engagement with Sam Harris. I have been writing articles on the nature of fundamental reality, the relationship with neuroscience, quantum physics, and physical reality, on the nature of perception, and so on. And on Twitter, I usually link these articles to these atheists, militant atheists and skeptics, and they usually don't respond. Once in a while, I think Sam has and disagreed. Once in a while, Dennett once or twice has and disagreed. So where are we now? Where we are now is that I've been inspired to write a book called The Future of God. It's coming out this year. And I've also edited a book with about 30 scientists and philosophers called Mind, Brain, and Cosmos. And frankly, I wouldn't have done these if I had not had these engagements and little jousts with militant atheists and skeptics. Where is my position right now? I believe that consciousness is fundamental in the universe, and that consciousness is pure awareness, and that all experience is because consciousness is fundamental. That science is an activity in consciousness, that scientific concepts, theories are conceived in consciousness, experiments are designed in consciousness, observations are made in consciousness, and that matter, space-time, energy, information are actually aspects of consciousness, differentiated aspects of consciousness. I believe that the materialists' philosophy, including that of Dennett and Shermer and Dawkins, and also probably Sam Harris, is based on a physicalist ontology, which says that matter is fundamental in the universe and consciousness is an epiphenomenon. It is an emergent property of the brain. So, right now there are three schools of thought on what is reality. One is, we can say, pure materialism, matter is everything. The other is what I would call non-dual conscious realism. Consciousness is everything. And then there's duality. There's mind and there's body. There's consciousness, there's matter. How they interact, we have no idea. Right now, the most fundamental open questions in science are: what is the universe made of? Number one. And number two, what's the biological basis of consciousness? My stance is the universe is consciousness. It's not made up of anything. It is consciousness and its qualia, which are sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, which we experience both as mind, matter, and the universe. The premise that materialists have is that physical matter is fundamental, and it somehow produces consciousness, thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, instincts, drives, self awareness, wonder, creativity, imagination, insight, intuition are all manifestations of matter, neural networks. I don't see how that could be. The physicalists say, we'll find out. This is called the hard problem. But there's no theory right now that actually shows how neural networks can process meaning or creativity or imagination or insight or intuition or even intention. So there's a big difference between where I am and where many non-dual conscious realism philosophers are. This is an ongoing debate that hasn't been settled. I feel that the materialists, like Richard Dawkins, are actually, in a sense, proponents of what is called naive realism, which means that they think that the world we perceive is the world as it really is. And science is the best way to know that world. I happen to believe, along with a lot of people, that naive realism is actually, in a way, takes us away from reality. As conscious human beings, we have no access to fundamental reality. We only have access to our perceptions. And these are limited by the nature of the human nervous system and the nature of our senses. In fact, by the time information reaches our brain, it's been abstracted at least 5 times, according to the mathematician Alfred Korzybski. And then, of course, there are limitations of the human brain that do not allow us to have access directly to reality, but only to our notions of reality, to our perceptions of reality. So there's a big divide between where Dawkins and militant atheists are, and in general, most skeptics are, and where we, who believe that consciousness is fundamental in the universe, are. What about God? Well, I do not subscribe to God as a dead white male in the sky, or to fairies somewhere out there, to invisible beings. I think God is the source of the universe. Being the source of the universe, that being is also our source. Because we are part of the universe. I don't think it's possible to be an objective observer of the universe, because we are also an activity of the universe. That source that delivers the universe, organizes the universe, destroys the universe, recycles the universe, is what we could call God. And my book, The Future of God, is in fact based on that deeper understanding of fundamental reality as consciousness. I collaborate with many physicists, many scientists, many mathematicians, and I have also collaborated with neuroscientists, and I engage with some great scientists who are interested in exploring the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. Physical reality being an experience in consciousness. My only wish is that when we engage in the future in these conversations, because I think engaging in conversations in a civilized manner in a polite manner is always healthy and expands our awareness. My hope is that both sides will not be dismissive of each other. Both will look at the latest theories that look at the cosmos, and there are some wonderful theories that look at the cosmos right now, the standard model of physics, and all that we're learning about the Higgs boson and cosmology through the James Watson telescope and looking at the cosmic wave background. That is wonderful. That's the scientific view of the cosmos. But we have to also realize that that scientific view is a representation of the human brain. And whatever fundamental reality is, it resulted in both the cosmos and the experience of the cosmos, which we think is because of our brain. But the hard problem remains. We do not know how we have any experience. We do not know how we have mental experience. Um, we do not know how we imagine. If I ask you to imagine a beautiful sunset in the ocean, you have that experience, and there's a neural correlate in the brain, but that neural correlate does not explain how the experience occurs. We do not know how we experience physical reality. How do photons coming to our eyes give us the experience of a three-dimensional reality in space and time? These are big, unanswered questions. The materialists, physicalists, atheists, skeptics say one day we'll find out. We'll find out that physical matter is all there is, and it produces everything, including our minds and our consciousness and everything else. Well, maybe it will, but right now we have no theory that explains any experience, mental or perceptual. And therefore, I think we're not in a good position to say what fundamental reality is, because we don't even know how we experience reality. Daniel Dennett seems to say in his book, Consciousness Explained, and otherwise, that the observing self is a hallucination that is produced in the brain. Well, maybe so, but if the observing self is a hallucination, everything that is observed by the observing self, being a hallucination, must also be a hallucination, which actually brings us to a very close tenet of the ancient wisdom tradition of Vedanta, which says, yes, if it's physical, it's not real. If you can see it, if you can touch it, if you can taste it, if you can smell it, if you can conceptualize it, if you can imagine it, it's not real. What is real is that consciousness without which you cannot see, touch, taste, smell, conceptualize, or imagine. That consciousness is fundamental reality, and by knowing consciousness, you can understand the expressions of consciousness, which are experiences in consciousness, both mental and perceptual. So there we are, a huge schism between the physicalists and I don't want to use the word spiritualists. Originally that meant people who do seances. I would say those who think that fundamental reality is consciousness, and I include myself in that camp. I have now 2 books coming, Mind, Brain, and Cosmos, which is already actually being promoted on Amazon. You can pre-order it, and it's written by 30 philosophers and scientists, and it's an ebook. It's over 800 pages. And my next book, The Future of God, which I have to thank Dawkins and Militant Atheists and Skeptics for having inspired me to do. What's my position on skepticism in general? I think it's very healthy. Skepticism is the basis of science. But not angry, strident skepticism, not militant cynicism, and not cynical mistrust, which in fact closes our mind. What's my relationship with the militant atheists and skeptics at the moment? Not very good, except with Michael Schermer. who has indeed displayed a lot more good behavior generally than most. And not that we agree on anything else. Um, I have, as I said, collaborated with scientists and physicists in the past. I intend to continue to collaborate in the future with them. Our next conference has Leonard Malodna coming back. We still don't agree on anything, but we have become very close friends. And he introduced me, in fact, to a new physicist at the Max Planck Institute who is also joining us at our Sages and Scientists conference. This has been a long explanation. There's a lot more to say, but it definitely is an update on my relationship with militant atheists and skeptics. And I'd like you to participate in this conversation. Give me your feedback, but don't be angry, okay? Don't use ad hominem and don't be nasty. And then we can have a real conversation. Take care.